Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed to Strange History. We dig up the forgotten side of war, the blunders, the missteps, and the small details that changed everything. Because in history, sometimes what didn't work tells us more than what did. Now, not all military innovation is genius. For every invention that gave Allied forces an edge, there were a dozen that looked good on paper but failed miserably in the mud and blood of real battlefields. These weren't the unofficial gadgets or field hacks soldiers made themselves. During sties Tendamenixats. These ended the danen sombren days, by sea studers bins, through sties firm run. These were officially issued items that came straight from quartermasters, defense contractors, and bureaucrats who thought they knew what soldiers needed. Some were useless, others were downright deadly. Let's go through 7 infamous examples of World War II gear that no soldier wanted to depend on when their life was on the line. Although it originated in World War I, the French Chauchat machine gun was still circulating among some Allied units in the early years of World War II. And, honestly, it was as bad as veterans remembered. Designed with an open magazine slot that let in mud, dirt, and snow, the Chauchat jammed after just a few bursts. Soldiers described it as a death sentence disguised as a weapon. In the trenches or forests of Europe, that flaw meant the difference between covering fire and complete helplessness. American troops unlucky enough to be issued old Chauchats during training or auxiliary operations learned quickly to ditch them for anything else. Even captured German weapons were considered safer. Its legacy? A painful reminder that mass production doesn't mean battlefield performance, and that sometimes simpler really is better. The PIAT, or projector, infantry, anti-tank, was Britain's answer to German armor. In theory, it was brilliant, a compact man-portable launcher that fired high-explosive rounds without any backblast. But, in practice, it was a cruel joke. The PIAT used a massive spring to launch its projectile. Cocking that spring required a soldier to literally lay on their back and wrestle with it, sometimes with their boot pressed against the weapon. If it misfired, which it often did, the user risked breaking their shoulder or hand. Many soldiers admitted to carrying PIATs more for show than for actual use. It had terrifying recoil, poor accuracy, and limited range. Though it did occasionally knock out a tank, the men who fired it paid for the victory with bruises and curses. Japan's Type 89 grenade discharger, nicknamed the knee mortar by U.S. troops, was actually a solid little weapon, lightweight, simple, and effective. The problem wasn't with the design, but with the translation. American soldiers captured them, saw the curved base plate, and assumed it was meant to rest on the thigh or knee while firing. The result? Shattered femurs and hospital evacuations. The recoil of a 50mm explosive shell going off inches from bone was catastrophic. The name stuck. Knee mortar. And so did the warning. Never believe everything you hear on the battlefield. By the middle of the war, the United States Army realized its standard-issue spade was just too heavy and, really cumbersome. So, they introduced a folding improved version. The M1943 entrenching tool. It was supposed to double as a shovel, axe, and pick. But, honestly, in reality, it did none of those things well. The hinge loosened quickly, making it wobble under pressure, and it bent or broke whenever it hit rocks or roots. Troops ended up using their helmets or even bayonets to dig trenches, because the so-called improvement just couldn't handle the soil. In wet terrain, things got even worse. Mud would clog the hinge, freezing it solid. The folding spade ended up teaching soldiers a pretty bitter truth. Versatility often means mediocrity in every function. The Goliath was, one of Nazi Germany's more ambitious ideas, a miniature remote-controlled tank packed with explosives. The plan was to drive it under enemy tanks, bunkers, or bridges, detonate it, and just watch the fireworks. But this early drone had some fatal flaws. It was controlled by a 700-meter wire, which honestly frequently snapped or got shot apart. The electric motors were pretty weak, the armor was thin, and even small-caliber bullets could destroy it before it got anywhere near its target. Worse, each Goliath cost as much as a light car, for a single-use bomb that usually never even reached its mark. By 1944, soldiers on both sides treated the Goliath as more of a curiosity than an actual threat. It looked futuristic, but like a lot of Nazi technology, it was just over-engineered and under-tested. During the early years of the war, the fear of gas attacks really loomed large. Every British soldier, and even civilians, were issued these bulky gas masks and protective capes. The irony: chemical weapons were almost never used in World War II combat. Troops had to lug around masks, canisters, and hoods that took up valuable space in their packs, only to realize, well, they'd never actually need them. The protective gear also created a pretty deadly side effect: heat exhaustion. In North Africa and Italy, soldiers fainted during marches from wearing the suffocating gear for drills or alerts that never led to any real gas attacks. By 1943, most soldiers quietly discarded their gas masks in the field, keeping only the pouches to store rations or ammunition. Even the toughest soldiers have limits, and for many Americans, that limit was a can of C-ration ham and lima beans. Technically, it wasn't useless, but honestly, it was psychological warfare from within. The infamous ration earned nicknames like Ham and Mother, Death in a Can, and, Pig Slop Deluxe. Troops traded cigarettes, ammunition, even socks, just to avoid it. Its greasy texture and overpowering smell made it pretty much inedible cold, but heating it up only made the odor worse. In freezing weather, the fat would congeal into this jelly-like mess. And if you didn't finish it, well, wild dogs and rats wouldn't either. The ham and lima beans became a running joke in the army, one that really symbolized the disconnect between those who designed field rations and those who actually had to live off them. Every one of these items, from the PIAT to the gas mask, tells a story about the growing pains of modern warfare. World War II was a time of massive innovation, but also mass production under, immense pressure. Mistakes were, honestly, inevitable. But to the soldier in the field, these weren't just minor inconveniences. They were hazards that could decide whether they came home or not. Poor design, bad planning, or bureaucratic overconfidence could be just as dangerous as enemy fire. The irony is that, well, many of these failures actually paved the way for better design. The PIAT led to the improved bazooka. The faulty spade became the template for the Cold War entrenching tool that's still in use today. Even C-rations evolved into the MRE. No tastier maybe, but at least flame-heatable. So next time you see a piece of World War II gear in a museum, just remember, not everything in that display was a triumph. Some of it was a hard-earned lesson. Which of these do you think was the worst? The gas mask that nearly cooked its wearer, the knee mortar that broke legs, or the ration that broke morale? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Strange History for more deep dives into the gear, gadgets, and grit of real wartime survival.